Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of CookieCast. Doing CookieCast, it's our NFL podcast, the Laces Out podcast. We are entering the darker time of the season, in the sense that there's not many games. Not many games from last week to go through, but there are games. There are some stats, and then we have literally 2 games to predict this week, because that's where we're at in the season. It's drawing to a close. Not quite finished, but getting there. See what myself, Paul, and our guest predict in a moment. Before that, please do consider like, share, subscribe, and comment. Leave a review where you can leave a review. And I know it's the last few episodes, but do feel free to share the podcast around. It's a big help to the podcast. It's a big help to us. Helps us bring future episodes. So yeah, big help. Right, let's get started. Here we go. This is CookieCast. Laces Out.
Recording is in progress, I believe. I'm reliably informed. Recording is in progress. Which is one of those weird things, making reference to something that I'm pretty sure doesn't appear on the start of the recording. Makes little sense. So, you'd think this was some sort of Darkest Timeline podcast because I've started it off by rambling at you. But in actual fact, I am not alone in my endeavours. I have my superb co-host, Mr. Paul Williams, here. So that can only mean it's time to talk about a funny-shaped ball played in a country that's not this one. It's the NFL podcast, our Laces Out podcast. We are entering into, some would say, the darkest point of the season, because after this week it gets a little sketchy. And
3 games to go, Andy. Just 3.
Obviously, you've got that thing because your last game is the biggest game of the season, although I fear that might not be the case this season. But anyway, it is the biggest game of the season and the last game of the season, and that's the end of it for many, many, many months. And if you've been listening to this podcast for 7 seasons, you will no doubt by now be absolutely sick to the back teeth of me saying that at every point, at this point, every season. So let's swiftly move on. Not many games to go through, which is one of those things. On one hand, it's like, well, there's not much to go through. But on the other hand, it opens up the opportunity for deep dives, discussions. I've got a little something that I want to bring to the table, and we'll do it after a stat. Now, normally, this would never happen, but I have kept the lion's share of the stats this week because of a twofold thing. One, I wanted to talk about one of the stats and then take a little pause to talk about something else. And I gave Paul what will no doubt be his favourite stat of the year. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to. Also, the first one is the smaller of the several stats. Anyway, that is jumping ahead. Like I say, a couple of things to go through. There's been some coaching movement, coaching changes, some extensions of contracts and things like that. Obviously, we had Black Monday, which I didn't feel was as black as it has been in the past. And then even then, there was some late announcements. Like we were more into like the Tuesday kind of area. So it was a bit like, okay, I guess that's just, I saw Richard Sherman talking at length about the Cowboys coach change and how it was particularly unfair, and then doing like a deep dive on how, and it sort of leans into this thing where like the coach is always the first person that's fired. It's all the coach's fault. He's the only person that is responsible for absolutely everything that happens on the field where he is not playing. Nobody else is held to the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that they are paid to do a job that, for want of a better way of putting it, they failed to do. So firing coaches, like in any sport, American football, soccer, if you are listening to us in America, I always have that, okay, why start there? Admit, to me, if it was like, well, this happened, that happened, the other happened, so that was all the coach's fault, then yes, it's probably time to move on. But all the people that are getting paid all the big money are all the ones that are still there afterwards, and it's like, where's the responsibility really lying? Anyway, that was just a.
I always think it's that sort of thing, and people always say it could be that it's easier to sack the manager than it is to try and get rid of offload loads of the players, which I would imagine is the sort of the thinking. But
Yes, because ease was the way to run a team. Oh, this is the easy option. Let's do that. Anything that's the easy option is not the right option. I'm. It may be kind of be sort of seen as me rambling because ultimately there is something that I don't want to discuss from the last week of games. A departure of a particular team that I honestly, wholeheartedly saw being one of the two teams in the Super Bowl. And that is not the case because they have gone out. What I will say is this, it's covered in the stats quite extensively. So that's maybe a point in time to have that conversation. Having watched that game, it's one of those things where you go, oh my word, that's so sad. It's so unfortunate. They were almost a surefire thing, etc., etc., etc. Let's jump back to last week, where I'm pretty sure the phrase "there's always an upset." Every week there's an upset, especially in the playoffs. So then for it to be that was the upset, obviously we are, or I am alluding to the Lions having been defeated. The Lions looked phenomenal. They looked amazing in that game. Which to say, A, they were beaten, and B, the Commanders looked freaking phenomenal in that game. Like, dial up. But like I say, there's a couple of things to go through there, which we can get into. And again, I'm ruining the predictions at this point. So I don't ruin any more predictions, and so that we can sort of move things forward, let's dive into the predictions. How does it look on the scoreboard, Mr. Williams?
You could never ruin anything, Mr. Cook. Never.
I can find you several people who would disagree with that.
So, the divisional round of the playoffs for 2025 brought with it, as Mr. Cook said, 4 games. And with it brought 4 sets of predictions, myself, Mr. Cook, and last week's guest was Mr. Stuart Woodmansey. We'll go through the games in order. So, Texans at Chiefs. We all picked the Chiefs. And we were all correct. As has been already stated, the Commanders at the Lions, we all picked the Lions, and we were all big time wrong, as the Commanders definitely showed up and definitely balled out, as it were. I think the main difference in that was obviously the turnovers that the Lions gave to the Commanders. Saw potentially a stat that could, or not a stat, sorry, a comment that could potentially sum up where the Lions are at, and it was that it would appear that Jared Goff just doesn't have the sort of the clutch mentality to be able to sort of know what he needs to do to drag his team through like a must-win game.
It's so weird because obviously this is not the this is not the first time this situation has sort of come up where a good season behind them, heading forward, moving on, and then bang. And you know, it's not just the Lions. There are teams that go through the regular season looking great, looking good, beating teams left, right, and centre. They step foot on that playoff stage, and it's over. And you just go, so what would the previous 16, 17, 18 weeks for to get to this point and just go straight out? Or get through that first round and then go. I mean, obviously, it's designed to go to a point. It's designed to get harder as it goes. You know, there were teams. It's always the same, you know, in the player perspective for the NFL, because the way it's designed, there are always teams that go into the NFL playoffs that categorically should not be there. That it is a waste of everybody's time. There are teams that are there that you're like, oh, are you going to go through? Are you going through? Or are you going out in the first week of the playoffs? What are we doing here? We spoke at length about this last week. The way the NFL, the playoffs, things like that work, it's a little bit crazy. So, yeah. That it is covered fairly lengthy in the stats, and it does sort of highlight some kind of obvious things for that team. But you can't diminish that Commanders team. That team showed up and showed out, and they were good. So that it's not the Lions just shit the bed and lost the game and that was the end of it. The Commanders were good, really good, going through to the end of the playoffs. Good. So yeah, like I say, we'll probably get back into it again once we've gone. So
yes, indeed. So 2 games down. We've all only got 1 point as we all had the Lions in that one. Rams Eagles. We all picked the Eagles, so we're all back up to 2 out of 3 correct. And then the Ravens at the Bills is where we had our only difference of opinion. Myself and Andy had both backed the Bills. Stu had backed the Ravens in this one, so Stu is the one who misses out, as it was indeed the Bills who triumphed in this one, which meant that myself and Andy needed a tiebreaker to split us as to who would get the point in the event that we tied. We obviously did. And we decided we would predict the total number of points across all 4 games combined. So I've done a little bit of totting up. There were 37 points in the Chiefs-Texans game, 76 points in the Lions-Commanders game, 50 in the Rams-Eagles game, and 52 in the Ravens-Bills game. So, in total, 215 points over the 4 games. Andy's prediction was 256.
yeah, it was way too high.
I predicted 231.
Yeah.
So I was closest. So I do bank that win, as it were, which moved me to 9.5 points for the season in the predictions. Andy stays on 8 points, but with the asterisks because he had his perfect week. The guest remains on 2.5 points for the season. So technically, because we've still got 2 weeks of games left, there is a possibility that Andy can still win. He would need to win both weeks, basically, which is possible. We'll come to that later on when we discuss the championship round of 60.
Yeah.
That's the predictions. That just leaves us with the side bet. Now, the side bet, obviously, We would usually pick 4 games. When we had the wild card round, we had to drop that to 3 games apiece. And obviously for the divisional round, we had to drop that to 2 games. So Andy took the Chiefs and the Bills as his 2 teams. He went into the week on 52 points. Those 2 wins pushes him up to 54 points. Very nice. I took the Eagles and the Lions. Oh dear. Oh dear indeed. So I went into the week starting on 54 points. That 1 point from the Eagles win does move me to 55 points. So I do remain 1 point ahead in the side bet standings. So it's happened again, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to a very interesting point of the season with the side bet, and it's very much up for grabs, shall we say, when it comes to picking each one of the 2 teams that we want in the championship round of games. That's all of the predictions and whatnot done from the divisional round of fixtures. That just leaves us with the stats, and obviously the stats will spark the inevitable discussion, I dare say.
Yeah, so almost no surprise, there's very little stats. There are only 5. However, they are hefty. I have kept hold of the first 3 because of a couple of things. There's possibly something else to talk about, sort of thing. I think I've already been through this. This is the NFL divisional round stats. Credit goes to somebody else this week. Tyler Sullivan of CBS Sports. So USA Today, not our source this week. So if anything's wrong, maybe that, But on the flip side, I'm not saying it's going to be wrong. I imagine these people can do their job. And we're going to deliver them to you. Big thanks to the Stats Mistress for still bringing us some juicy stats. And let's just get into it because it's going to take some doings. The first one is apparently about Travis Kelce. I can only presume that's also the Kansas City Chiefs, but let's find out. Travis Kelce can still flip the switch. At 35 years old, Travis Kelce is closer to the end of his career than he is the beginning. With that in mind, there's always the question surrounding the legendary tight end of whether or not he can still be a game-wrecking force when the situation calls for it. In Kansas City's win over the Texans, the tight end registered a season-high 117 yards on 7 catches to go along with a touchdown. That's his 9th career playoff game with 100 or more receiving yards, which surpasses Jerry Rice most all time. I think we've seen it in previous seasons. To me, this is Belichick, Brady, Gronk season system for as many seasons as I can count. They slide that legendary tight end off to the side through the regular season, so you forget that they exist. And then playoffs is, we're just going to bring them back out on the field, and look at all those touchdowns, because you forgot that Travis Kelce existed, apparently. Yeah, Belichick, Brady, and Gronk did it for. Anybody remember Gronk's injured? How is he injured? Because it's week 3. Wait, how is he injured again? It's week 3. We don't need him for the next 13 weeks. But Look out for him in those playoffs, won't you? Because he's going to be just banging touchdowns in. Anyway, let's talk about Saquon Barkley instead, shall we? Shall we? The second stat is about Saquon Barkley owns the Rams. Bag fuck. One of the big storylines entering Sunday's playoff matchup between the Rams and the Eagles was whether or not Barkley could come close to his dominant showing against Los Angeles from earlier this season. Well, it looks like he can/did. Back in week 12, Barkley rushed for 255 yards against the Rams, and then followed that up with a 205-yard rushing performance in the divisional round win. Those totals on Sunday were the fifth most rushing yards in a playoff game all time. If you account for his previous totals, Barkley's totaled 534 scrimmage yards against the Rams this season, which is the most against a single team in a season since 1950, including playoffs. Now then, I want to address something here. As it stands at this point in time, the Eagles could be one of the teams that goes to the Super Bowl. Would it not have been an idea to maybe dial back Saquon Barkley's workload? Would it not have been an idea to consider whether, and I really hate to say it, but if Saquon Barkley gets injured, yeah, that's going to put a real dent in that team, like a massive hole in that team. But apparently not, as far as the Eagles are concerned. Just keep sending him out to get the yards, and they'll all be fine. I couldn't decide which I was more. Was I more sad for the Lions, or was I more happy to see the Rams go out? Because fuck in the words of Stuart Woodmansey, fuck the Rams. And I couldn't have agreed more. They need to go away until next season, and maybe even a season more. Unfortunately, that brings me to my third and final stat, which is not one. It's the other side of the ball, so, let's talk about Jaden Daniels. No stage is too big for Jaden Daniels. While Daniels played at LSU and has been in many hostile environments in his playing career, Saturday's playoff matchup at Ford Field against the Detroit Lions was arguably the biggest stage of his life. And he didn't blink. Daniels led the Commanders into Detroit and pulled off one of the biggest upset in recent memory. He completed 22 of his 31 passes for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns in the winning effort while adding 51 yards rushing. Daniels is only the second rookie to defeat the number 1 seed in the playoffs and the 6th rookie to start in conference championship game. He's also the 3rd player in NFL history to have at least 500 yards passing, 75 yards rushing, 4 passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions through 2 games of the postseason, joining Patrick Mahomes in 2019, Josh Allen 2021. He's tied with Ben Roethlisberger for the most wins by a rookie, 14, in NFL history. And if he breaks the record, he'll also become the first rookie to ever start in the Super Bowl. Insanity. It's one of those things that I saw something pop up earlier this week, and I sent it around our group about apparently, and I have sort of looked this up separately, Googled it, read it. Apparently, Jane Daniels has been using VR technology to improve his game. So much so that apparently his NFL contract was dependent on using the VR technology that he had been using. So there, just quickly to go through it, there are a series of quotes about how he can read a defense 80% faster than previous. He's been trained to play the game at 1.75 speed, and this allows him the ability to process things that much faster. There is a his stats, his comparison stats before the VR training and after the VR training. It's like two completely different players. He was considered a mid-round draft pick before starting the VR training, and he went second in the draft. So now I personally, I don't know if you might be able to see it, is this here? I personally am a fan of the VR, and I am also a fan of when it can be used in other scenarios, other working environments, and certainly something like this. I have played some NFL football in VR, and it is phenomenal. And I have lost every game I've played. Still a lot of fun, but yeah, it's very interesting. Gives you that insight into the game, and is hard as balls. So, what I can say is, I feel that this last game gave us the opportunity to see if all these things are true, just what's potentially capable with this sort of technology. And if it is true that this is the difference, the thing that's making the difference, then cool beans. That is over halfway through the stats, but due to technological restraints, we will take a short break, refresh, compose, and then get ready for the difficult part of the stats. We'll be back shortly. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to blink, really. We'll be back. We'll get back at it. Catch you in a minute. And just like that, we're back. Blink and you miss it.
Indeed.
That's how we roll. We're just straight back in. We're straight back at it. And we're straight back to the stats. I believe Paul has, some would say the sadder of the stats. Some would say only 50% of them are sad. And Paul would say...
Well, my first stat indicates that the Lions just could not overcome their slew of injuries. Now, every team deals with injuries, but the Lions seem to be particularly snake-bitten on the defensive side of the ball throughout the season. Aiden Hutchinson going down with a significant leg injury was the headliner throughout the season, but various other injuries across the roster started to pile up, leading to questions as to whether or not Dan Campbell's club, a betting favourite to win the Super Bowl, could withstand it. Those injuries didn't subside either, with starting corner Amik Robinson going down early inside his playoff matchup against Washington. That latest injury was one of the many straws that brought the Camels back and led the Lions to playing practice squad players in a playoff game. That was ultimately a piece to their demise in the upset loss. I think it's very sort of obvious to sort of like say that had they been at full strength, and I mean you can make that argument like that no team's ever really at full strength, but even if they'd have had like 2 or 3 of the players back, maybe it would have been a different outcome and a different story. But I think the second that Hutchinson went down, it definitely started to make you think they're not really going to go the distance on this. But obviously, they tried their best and just couldn't overcome it. But this is the game. This is the game, and that's why you need to have the squad depth and things like that to be able to withstand injured players and things like that. But we'll move on. And my final stat, and the one that Andy may have been alluding to, deals with our fourth and final game, which was the Ravens and the Bills. The Ravens are their own worst enemy. How sweet it is. The Baltimore Ravens outgained the Buffalo Bills 416 to 273. I'm assuming that means yards.
Yeah.
Converted 7 of their 10 third down opportunities and averaged 7.3 yards per play during Sunday's playoff matchup. Despite that, they were sent packing, largely because they beat themselves. Baltimore committed 3 turnovers, which led to 10 points scored by Buffalo in what proved to be a 2-point loss. On top of giving the ball away, the Ravens couldn't execute when they needed to most, after orchestrating an 88-yard touchdown drive and set up with an opportunity to tie the game. Lamar Jackson hit an open Mark Andrews for the would-be score, but the veteran tight end, who also fumbled earlier in the contest, simply dropped the catch. It is eerily similar to Baltimore's AFC Championship loss to the Chiefs last year, where mental mistakes and turnovers cost the Ravens a chance at a Super Bowl title. If they had been just a little bit more careful with the football in this game and executed simple plays like the 2-point attempt above, there's a strong possibility they would have advanced. Absolutely. They do see that turnovers kill teams, and that was very much the case in this particular one. But can't say I'm disappointed, because my mantra going into this particular playoffs was anyone but the Ravens, and I got what I wanted. So, perfectly happy with that outcome.
I don't have as big a problem with the Ravens as I am aware you do, but I also defend your right to have that problem because I agree with its foundation. I particularly like this version of the Ravens, but it just comes back to the same thing time and time again. You can't play an entire season and then walk out on the field in the playoffs and not play your absolute best. And admittedly, for example, in the Lions case, if you go out there and you give your absolute best with what you've got available and you then end up losing, that's all, like with a child. If the child goes out and does their absolute best and they don't get the result, that's all that matters. They tried their best. And I know we're dealing with fully grown adults and we're dealing with like sportsmen and people that are, again, be paid millions and millions of dollars to do their job. Still falls into that category though. If you've done everything you possibly can and you still lose, then the better team won. That's how it works in a game of two teams. The Bills, especially their defense, always has that ability to be able to pick out a weakness and exploit it. So, there that is. Obviously, we do find ourselves yet again in that position where the Bills have gone all this way. It's almost like it writes itself.
So, before we go on to obviously the championship matchups and our picks, etc., etc., I feel it's prudent to go back to our season-long picks and see who's been eliminated this week. Now, obviously, the Detroit Lions made up a number of people's picks.
They did indeed.
Matthew, Two Teams Hurley, had a Detroit Lions Cincinnati Bengals Super Bowl matchup on the cards. So he is now completely eliminated from contention. Mark and Tony both had Detroit Lions versus the Kansas City Chiefs, so they are now deleted from the NFC contention. And it wasn't a great weekend for me, as not only in the weekend, going to lose both of my teams. I lost it in one day, as I had the Detroit Lions versus the Houston Texans. So on Saturday, I lost my entirety of my Super Bowl prediction. So yeah, the people that are still in with a chance. So no one predicted correctly from the NFC side of things. No one had either the Eagles or the Commanders. Shock. But one of yourself, Stu, Mark, Tony will get the Kansas City Chiefs right. Or Matt Moore did predict a Packers Bills Super Bowl. So he could also get that particular one right and take point. So it is very much not all to play for, because there's obviously no points on offer for season-long predictions. But it is interesting to see who went with what and where we find ourselves when it comes to the business end of the season.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Still, nobody's got a Super Bowl at this point, but still people in, people playing, etc. I think at this point in time, it's fair to say if you pick the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl at the start of the season or in pre-season, then you may be in the position where you're now going, doing all right so far. That is basically that done. The stats are done, the week's done, the results are done. So what that leaves is some important pieces of business, because obviously, as Paul mentioned earlier, I need to win every week now. So I'm going to get that bit done. And what at this time in 2 of 3 seasons, it almost becomes the more important piece of business. We have a side bet to consider, which so, Paul, for what is almost the final time, what games do you have for us to dive into this week?
Well, the NFL championship round of fixtures brings with it 2 games. The Washington Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Buffalo Bills at the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, obviously, in the book before me, I see my picks, I see Mr. Andrew Cook's picks, and taking yet another guest slot prediction, it is the charming and delectable Mrs. Amy Williams, ladies and gentlemen. So, 3 sets of predictions, and across, even though there's only 2 games, we do not have a consensus pick across the board.
Really?
So, yes, indeed. Now, Commanders at Eagles. Both myself and Mr. Cook have taken the Eagles to get the game win. Yeah, to get the win here.
Hands down, and this will probably surprise nobody. Hands down, the hardest game to pick, this one, because there is a big part of me that's like, I think the Commanders might be able to do this. And then I remembered a guy that plays on a team who has basically dominated the entire season, and I went, oh yeah, the Eagles have got Saquon Barkley, so that's probably going to cement that
I don't know. I still maintain that the second game of the week is the tasty fixture.
Oh, don't get me wrong. It is the game of the year. And it's the fact that now almost consistently, we almost get it every year at this point. And it's the Super Bowl that everybody wants. And we can't have. We're not allowed it.
Yeah.
We can't get it. So it's like an amuse-bouche.
Oh, lovely. Of course, we have had this game already earlier in the season, the Bills prevailed. They were one of the only two teams to hang a loss on the Chiefs so far this season. Of course, the second one was the Broncos. Doesn't really count. The Chiefs weren't really playing any of their start. But yes,
I saw something earlier in the week, and then I saw it again today that said that the Bills have been awarded a roughing the passer penalty already ahead of their game against the Chiefs.
Well, we'll come to the Bills
true.
Chiefs game. I mean, it is one of some of the penalties given in the Chiefs Texans game were ridiculous. But if we pull at that thread, open that kind of worms, we'll be here for days. So Commanders at Eagles. Myself and Andy have taken the Eagles. Mrs. Williams has taken the Commanders, which is surprising, considering that when they were known as the Washington football team, she wanted absolutely nothing to do with them when it came to predicting games. But what can I say? She did actually say that when I gave her the options of Commanders Eagles, she had something in the back of her head that was just like, I feel like I've got to pick Washington in this one. Maybe she knows something we don't. That's all I can say. And then it's the big one. The Bills at the Chiefs. Now, Andy has taken what some would say is the smart pick of the Chiefs, whereas I and Mrs. Williams have both taken the Bills.
Oh.
I don't know if I've gone with this one as more of a heart rather than head pick.
I feel like this comes up every time, and I feel like you say that every time. I think you're like, I really hope the Bills win. Doesn't ever go that way. Right, here's the thing. If we fast forward in time and we look at the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl is the Commanders versus the Bills, I will be pants off right now. Just like, fuck yeah. Because it would be so fresh to sit down and watch arguably a young team going up, a rookie quarterback going to the Super Bowl. You've got the Bills, and just an opportunity for them to answer the question, can it be done?
Well, interestingly enough, so if it ends up being Commanders Bills, technically that has already happened in the Super Bowl before. Obviously, there were the Washington Redskins back then, but this fell in. Obviously, the Bills made it to 4 Super Bowls in a row, and they made it to the Giants, the Redskins, and then the Cowboys twice. So part of me is kind of hoping that the Eagles win this and the Bills win it, so it completes the fact that the Bills will have played a Super Bowl against every single team from the NFC East.
I saw something earlier this evening that said if the Chiefs go to the Super Bowl and they win, Mahomes will be cemented as the GOAT. If the Bills go to the Super Bowl and win, Josh Allen will be cemented as a legendary quarterback. If the Commanders go to the Super Bowl and win, then Jaden Daniels will be, records will be set with his name in his rookie season. And if the Eagles win, we'll all go about our day. And I was like,
wow.
Yeah, I suppose. I really want to argue that point, but no, I think you have a genuine point there. Not to diminish it in any way, but yeah.
I think if they do go all the way, I think it just throws more credence behind the idea that Saquon, if he doesn't end up winning it, it gives more credence to the idea of Saquon Barkley probably should have had more votes for MVP, because to say that he's held that team sort of together throughout the season, I mean, it might be a bit of an overstatement, but
I do not think so in any way, shape, or form. Saquon Barkley is the Eagles at this point. Like the questions around how do I phrase this? The missing quarterback. I mean,
it's not looking good, is it?
I didn't want to draw too much attention to it, but there have been points throughout the season like, oh, Jalen Hurts isn't playing today. Did we know that?
I think when I was listening to a podcast earlier, I don't know if I misheard this, but I think they said that Jalen Hurts hasn't got 300 yards passing in the playoffs yet, and he's played 2 games.
Yeah,
that
it literally
that's kind of ridiculous.
It's handoff after handoff after handoff after handoff. Now, if you've got a weapon like Saquon Barkley, you absolutely hand off the ball. It's that simple. So it makes sense. But then are you really doing your job to do more than this?
I suppose if you've read, if you've sort of like scouted the defense and you know the sort of the positions they're going to take up and you know the sort of plays that they're probably showing you that they're going to play, if you know there's a sort of a way that you can pick the holes for Saquon to run through, it kind of makes sense to sort of like, just ride that horse all the way as much as you can.
Absolutely. If somebody said to you, you can win this game by doing this, why would you go against that? Why would you pick you're like, oh, I can hand it off, get a few yards, get a first down, get close to the end zone, get all of that, or I can risk it to look better in this area or that area. There's all sorts that can happen through the air. Picks, interceptions, dropped passes, Raven. It's that thing of there's a lot less risk handing the ball off. And when you're handing it off to a juggernaut, it's just a no-brainer. So you could say this hasn't happened, that hasn't happened. Is the quarterback playing this week or not? Are they playing this snap or not? Any of those things. We're going into championship playoffs at this point. It's clearly a system that's working. My fear is what I said earlier. One knock, one bump, one trip, somebody falls wrong, and the next thing, oh shit. So I think there's that, but at this point in time, it's tried and tested, it's tried and true. Let's just get it finished up by now.
Very much so. So that leaves us just with the side bet to sort out. Now, there was a potential where if myself and Mr. Cook had picked completely different on both sides of both games, there was an argument to be made that we would just take those 2 teams each, and that would boost our side bet odds in theory, because 4 teams, we would in theory have picked all 4 teams between us. So that would have opened up the possibility for 4 picks to be made. Because we've both backed the Eagles in the Eagles Commanders game, that now isn't possible. So we will only be able to take 1 team each. So basically, what it boils down to is Andy's behind by 1 point in the side bet. Do you want to go first and take the Eagles, or do you want to go first and take the Chiefs?
I 100% want to go first and take the Chiefs.
Okay. So Andy will take the Chiefs.
I feel I handed you a hand grenade with the pin pulled out there because I would love to say I think the Bills can do it. I think this is the year. I think they've got what it takes. And so on and so forth. However, whether it's the script or the refs or it's just that the Kansas City Chiefs are really that good,
we'll wait and see, so to speak. So Andy has the Chiefs in the side bet, and I have the Eagles in the side bet. So there's a possibility that it will remain at 1 point gap. There's a possibility it will be tied. There's a possibility I will be 2 points clear. one of those scenarios will come into play, and then it will be a case of how we sort of divvy up the side bet for the Super Bowl. We'll have to get a bit creative. We might have to go with like first touchdown scorer, point spread, total points. We'll think of something to make it interesting going into the last game. But as it stands, that is all of the predictions done for the season. All that's left is obviously to go through this result next week, and then the week after we have to do our Super Bowl preview predictions and stuff like that. Dare I suggest there may be some guests, or at least a guest, that may join us for the Super Bowl show?
So over the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a stern attempt to gather guests, maybe multiple, maybe one or two, etc. Obviously, we will have what is possibly the biggest piece of business to do week after next, which is to spend at least 45 minutes talking about what the menu is going to be for the Super Bowl. Because let's face it, which is bigger, the game or what you're eating? Because there is I'm not saying in constant, I don't want to use the word constant, it is a frequent topic in our house, because I'm trying to push for I want to go down the homemade route. I've been over the last year, I've been upping my game in all sorts of areas. If you need a pizza or a chicken, or you want some shrimp tacos, give me a call. Whereas the other side of the argument, and I don't mean the other person, I just mean the other side of the argument, is it's pretty much a yearly occurrence in this house to get a takeaway for that one chance to actually get the yearly takeaway. So the big question: who's going to the Super Bowl, and what are you eating while you're watching it? All that and more.
It's what keeps the public coming back.
That's why. I mean, I imagine there are some people who are like, I didn't turn up for the last 18 weeks, but I'm here now, and let's find out. So, some games happening, I don't know, but that's not what we're here. We're here to find out what's on the menu. So there we go. That is it. The book closed. Last week is done. This week's prediction is done. We are at basically 50-50 at this point in time. We have the opportunity to see a brand new, fresh and funky Super Bowl. And we have an opportunity to see something that some would say, probably getting a little old and tired at this point in time, but hey, yeah. Join us next week when we go through these games. It probably won't take very long. We'll try and get some stats, if there are stats from 2 games. And yes, we could always talk about I nearly got through it. I nearly said it. I nearly managed to say it, but fuck the Pro Bowl. Jesus Christ. Oh, let's go and play flag football and highlight how terrible our quarterbacks are when they can't hit a target from 20 yards away. Gee whiz. Anyway, thank you very much to my co-host, Mr. Williams, for running the book, which is a job he excels at. For his good lady wife, for offering up what ultimately was a deciding pick. Exceptional work. Thank you to you, the listener, you, the watcher, you, the public, you, the NFL fan, presumably. Thank you for joining us. We are not the only podcast on the network. We have a football, a round ball in this situation, podcast. It's weekly whilst ever the season's in play, and it covers everything from a full Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest perspective and everything in between. we have a wrestling podcast, which we will be bearing down on very shortly to cover the latest premium live event. Goddamn pay-per-view. When it's in season, there's a Formula One podcast, which I'm reliably informed is nearly in season. And yes, if you're not tired of hearing these tones, please don't have to look at this face. I also do a weekly podcast. Look for the Darkest Timeline on the Podcast Network. It's just me talking about what I've done in the week. A lot of parenting stuff, computer games, trying to stay somewhat remotely sane, failing. Yeah, and there's like a movie or two in there somewhere. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you here, same bat time, same bat channel, to talk about the big game. Until then, it's goodbye from him, and it's goodbye from me. We shall catch you next time. Tatty vibes.
So there you go. Playoff football. It has its ups, it has its downs, but it keeps on trucking. Big thank you for watching. Big thank you for listening. Big thank you for being here. Do come back next week to find out what our Super Bowl is going to be. But before you go, please do consider like, share, subscribe, and comment. Leave a review where you can leave a review. Check out the website. That's one there. Check out the website, thecookiecast.com. There we have social media links and an email button, and that way you can get in touch with us. That is it for this one. Come back next time, find out what the Super Bowl is going to be, and find out what we're going to be eating, because that's the important stuff. I'm kidding. Not really. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to see you next time. So I'm going to say bye, and I'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to CookieCast. Please make sure to like, share and subscribe.